had with my double major in mechanical and biomedical, I thought 3M would be a great choice for me. They have all the different divisions, and I thought, boy, I can start in a manufacturing plant, and then I can go to pharmaceuticals or bioworks and the personal safety. Turns out I spent my entire career between industrial and electrical, so I never ended up using that biomedical part of my degree, but it was fun to take it in school. I also went on, and 3M did pay for me to get an MBA from the Carlson School. So I did that in operations research. I moved on then from manufacturing engineer and manufacturing technology engineer to being a manager. So I've been a manager in the manufacturing field for the last 15 years. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
That's perfect. And then why don't you share a little bit about your volunteerism community outreach, since that's how we first connected.
Yeah. So one of the volunteer aspects that I love the most has been working with FIRST Robotics. I don't know if many of you have done that. It's the elementary school, middle school, and high school robotics competitions. And they're primarily done through school systems, especially as the older ages. And there's competitions where kids build robots to achieve certain tasks. And it's kind of like athletic sports for the mind. So these kids build these robots, and they have these amazing challenges, and then we fill up the venues at schools, and it's been a lot of fun. So I've really enjoyed doing that and connecting with the high school kids that way.
I love it. Thank you. Anna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Anna. Went to the University of Minnesota and I graduated in video and feedback. Okay. I did a Bachelor of Science in Individualized Studies, which means I kind of like built my own major. And so I used like mechanical engineering classes and product design classes. And I'm in my current role at Target as a product engineer, working on outdoor furniture basically for like Target own brands. I've been there for about 6 months. Yeah.
The content of that email meant.
Perfect. Thank you. And then Shauna as well.
Yeah, so I studied mechanical engineering at Iowa State. I just graduated in December of 2018, so it's just been about a year and a half now. I went into mechanical engineering with the idea that I would eventually go into medical devices, and now I work at Boston Scientific as a design assurance engineer for new product development. I always thought I would be a nurse, but then I just don't like nursing stuff, as I found out in high school. So being able to still be in the medical field without patient interaction, which was my big thing, it's been really nice. And I've been with Boston Scientific as a full-time employee for about a year and a half. And then I did 4 internships with them throughout my college experience. So.
I love it.
Yeah.
So lots of experience going into that full-time role.
Yeah.
So we'll plan on spending the hour just popcorn style. I'll have questions, and essentially feel free to speak up, or, you know, I can certainly call on you, but that seems unnecessary. And so to start, each of you shared a little bit about your major and kind of how you selected it or what you knew about engineering when you were in school. If you wouldn't mind elaborating a little more on that, because engineering is a big topic with a lot of different job possibilities and career opportunities. So we'd love to hear a little more about that.
I wish I had a better story here. Mine, unfortunately, you know, it was kind of the last engineering. I didn't really love chemistry enough to go into chemical. And I didn't really love the electrical portion enough to go in electrical. I liked the generals, the thermodynamics, the statics, the fluids, the math and the stats. So for me, mechanical engineering was kind of the best all-around option. And again, I did like the biomedical piece. At the time, Carnegie Mellon didn't offer a major only in biomedical. It was only offered as a dual. So that's why I had picked that with a dual major. So I mean, I ended up loving the major, but I can't say it was any passion towards mechanical engineering that pulled me there.
Yeah.
And I apologize, I'm now showing up as Anna Sawyer. My name is Jennifer. I was having some trouble on my other device, so I switched devices here. Sorry for the confusion.
You're totally fine. We are all adapting in this
Yeah.
technology world we're living.
I guess I started as an aerospace major my freshman year of college, actually. And it's kind of funny because in high school, I was like obviously really into math and science, and I loved building things. I loved creating things. And so I was like, that's engineering, right? So I decided to do aerospace. And then I was like, oh, like maybe there's not a ton of jobs in aerospace in Minnesota. And I knew I wanted to stay in Minnesota. So I switched to mechanical engineering. And then it wasn't until like mostly through my sophomore year that I found out that there was a product design major at the University of Minnesota. And so I wasn't really educated in like what the differences were between product design and mechanical engineering. And so I started taking some of those classes, and that's when I realized like some of the things that I thought I enjoyed, like building things and creating product, was more product design. And so that's kind of how I ended up doing like a build your own major, since I'd already taken like mechanical engineering classes, and I still enjoyed like the technical aspects of design that I couldn't really find in just a purely product design major.
And that is fairly unique, building your own major. At what point did you realize that was a possibility, or how did you go about exploring that?
Yeah, I actually didn't like fully commit to it until my 5th year, which is crazy. Once I found out about it, I decided, I was like, oh, I'll just do a product design minor. So I was still in mechanical engineering. And then I started taking like too many product design classes. And at that point I was like, whoa, like maybe I should just double major. And then, I wasn't planning well. I was like, okay, if I do a double major, I'm going to be at school for like another 2 to 3 years or something crazy, just because of like the sequence of classes that you had to take. So then I started doing some research, found out that I could just build my own. I had way more than enough credits. And so, yeah, it was just like a process of like writing about what I wanted to do after school and how I thought each class was going to help me get there.
That's great. Thank you.
I don't really know if I don't really have a great story either, but I was just kind of looking through job boards because once I determined I didn't really like the patient interaction things of healthcare, I was looking through job boards of like 3M and Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and trying to see like jobs that sounded interesting, which jobs required what majors, and then mechanical engineering just kind of was a common denominator amongst a lot of those. And so I just kind of went that way. Iowa State had a biomedical minor, but it involved a lot more biology than what I wanted to do. So I just didn't do that, and it hasn't been an issue so far. But yeah, so that's how I just decided to stick with mechanical.
Well, I love that each of you are saying you don't have a great story. As you're telling us about, you had already interned for 4 years before graduating, going into biomedical. This is all great. I'm super impressive. Always makes me feel lazy on a Friday. What am I doing with myself? Would love to spend some time though talking about, as you've each entered the workforce, what were like specific aspects of jobs working that college didn't prepare you for, that you didn't expect? And I realize right now we're all online and dealing with COVID. That could be another major topic as well, and just adapting what traditional day-to-day work would look like.
So I can start. 3M tends to hire a lot of engineers that are going into manufacturing, at least directly into our plants. So I guess I kind of assumed I'd start more as a junior role and be kind of working under somebody and learning things. And instead, day one, I showed up and I was responsible for a $30 million piece of equipment. And there was 12 operators, and they didn't report to me, but I had to kind of tell them the best way to do things. And being in that position of that much responsibility and authority on day one, I think kind of surprised me a little bit. Looking back, it's a great way to start new engineers in the company. You're tied the most to the customer. You're actually making the product that the customer needs that day, and you have to make sure that the line is running and the quality is good and be checking up on the cost and the service. So you're kind of responsible for all aspects of that manufacturing experience for the customer and making sure that they get the product that they wanted at the right quality. I guess I loved it. I was not expecting that much at the beginning. And some of the more difficult pieces, this was 20 some years ago, and I was one of the first female engineers in the plant. And there's a lot of 50-year-old operators that didn't really like having a 21-year-old female recommending that they do things. So dealing with that also surprised me.
Yeah. So right after graduating, I actually started working at Honeywell Aerospace in Minneapolis. It wasn't exactly like the role I wanted to have right after graduating, but you know, it was a job. And yeah, something that I kind of thought about in college a lot was being a female in engineering. But it was never really a problem, you know, like there were other females. But I think at Honeywell was the first time I kind of experienced like the kind of discrimination that I've heard people talk about, and it was unexpected. But I think it really helped me like understand what I don't want in a job, which is actually really good because I didn't know exactly what I wanted, but after that job, I was like, okay, I definitely am going to value a company that is really supportive of who I am, has like a diversity program, and that kind of thing. And that's kind of how I ended up at Tarkin. I think having that 1 year at Honeywell really shaped who I am now.
Thank you for sharing. And it's great to hear of taking an experience where it was suboptimal, but realizing how can you use that to your benefit and really build on it for better experiences. I think it's something we're all continually looking at. How about yourself, Shauna?
I think the biggest transition for me from college to the workforce was in college. I could kind of spread my schedule throughout the entire day. And once I didn't want to work on something, I could just like put it off until later. But once you get in the workforce and you're like working with other people, if they expect you to get it done before lunch, you got to get done before lunch. And it's not just kind of the deadlines get shorter and shorter, it feels like almost. And so you kind of get stuck into this like 8 to 10 hour day is what I typically work. And instead of having like your full 24 hours that you get to plan out, you just kind of, you get this little time slot when everyone's in the office. And now when everyone's online, basically. And it was something weird that took some getting used to because I couldn't just like go home. I had to stay in the office and do what I had to do in the office.
Well, it's interesting. You each alluded to, I mean, can you hear me? Did I freeze?
You froze.
Perfect. Is it better now?
Yep.
You each alluded to the fact that you're problem solvers both in your role, but then also problem solvers when you were dealing with counterparts or colleagues. What do you find more difficult? Is it managing other people, or is it managing kind of the role that you're in, and which is tougher and why?
So I've transitioned from engineer to manager. When you are someone's actual manager, it's very different than having to influence them as a peer. So just starting with a company, you're not going to be anyone's manager right away. they're on your team and you have to get their input to deliver on your team's goals. I think everyone in college has been on teams where one person just doesn't contribute or isn't meshing with everyone else. And that's a different dynamic than when you get into the corporate world, because you often they're the
when
only
I drop you
person
off,
from maybe that
can
group.
we buy a flower basket? Yeah.
Uh-oh, Tierney, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
So you're having to, you need their input to keep moving, and it's difficult when they don't report to you. What do you do about not getting their
I'm in a
input?
video.
So, and it's a different skill set then to make them understand that, hey, this is important. Now, the difference is at school, maybe somebody doesn't care about that class, and generally everyone cares about their job. So it's working with them to make them understand that they're critical to this and the team can't move on, and getting that shared vision and that alignment to goals. But that can be difficult to do when you're new and starting at a company, but it's important. And, you know, when we look at our group of engineers that we have in our team, yes, we expect strong technical skill sets from everyone. The people that do the best also get that interpersonal bit. They understand what's critical to a business and how to align the team's goals to that and to deliver the critical items and kind of not sweat the small stuff. So that's really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great to hear, and would be curious what Anna and Shauna, their perspectives as well.
Sorry, I didn't catch the initial question.
You're totally fine. So initial question was, each of you talked about basically being problem solvers in both your role, but then also having to work with colleagues, and wondering what you find tougher. Is it interacting with other people or the actual role itself of doing your job? And what really creates those challenges?
I think for me, the role itself isn't that difficult. I think in college, I imagined that I'd have to like remember every formula or like remember everything that I learned in the textbook, and it's not like that. Like, I think that's not really the challenge. I think the challenge is more working with others. And for me, being like an introvert, it is a lot harder to work with others. And I think one of the things that I noticed in my first job out of college is like how to accept feedback, which is something that's going to happen for the rest of your career. Like, you have milestone meetings and you get feedback from your leader, and how are you going to take that and improve? And that just wasn't really a thing that I got in college. It's not like you were like on a team and then your teammate like, hey, you sucked at this or something. But so yeah, I think receiving critique and working with others is more difficult than the actual job itself.
Yeah, absolutely true. And Shauna?
I would have to agree a lot with what Anna was saying. In college, it's different for everyone, but if you like do your part, it's almost as if everyone in your group is just going to give you like an A rating, just be like help out one peer to another peer. But that doesn't really help you like grow as a person if you don't get those critiques. And so I had, for my first year, we did 3, 6, 9, and 12-month like check-ins with my supervisor and my manager. And it was just like little things that they would pick up on. It's like, oh, I didn't even realize I was doing stuff. Like, if I get sent an email, if I don't like acknowledge the email, they want you to like acknowledge every email. Even if there's no action items with it, they just want you to acknowledge that you got it. And so that's now something that I do with every email. And so it's just being able to take critiques is different because they're more willing to give you critiques in the workforce than they did in group projects in college.
To add to that, I would say that your supervisor's ability to give that input is very dependent on your supervisor. It's
Yeah.
difficult to do. And if you're
Yeah.
not getting that from your supervisor, make sure you ask for it.
Mhm.
Every time you meet with them, what are some things I can do better? If you were doing that, how would you have improved it? Just kind of specifically asking for that feedback, because it's not a skill set that all supervisors have.
Yeah.
That's a
And
great point. And Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind kind of expanding on that, because I know you talked about just the ability to have critiques, and FIRST Robotics is such an important part of that entire program. How do you bring that into the workforce then of your role?
Of the providing feedback?
Yeah.
So it's also easier to give feedback sometimes to the people who you know are open to it. So be sure there are certain people that I give feedback to, and they instantly get defensive and come up with all the reasons or excuses why that doesn't apply. And it's sort of on them. If I'm giving them this feedback, it's because it's something that we're all seeing in the workforce. And if they don't want to hear it and don't want to change it, they're just hurting themselves long term. So if somebody cares enough about you to be giving you that feedback, make sure you're open to it. I say a lot of time, especially in FIRST, you're dealing with maybe high school kids, you give them some feedback on how to do something and they just think, oh, you don't understand, you don't know what's going on. And there's a lot of pushback on that. I get less of it when it's the people that report to me, but there are still people that don't want to hear it. And it would always be best to work with that person and say, okay, here's why I did it. Here's what I was thinking. What would you recommend? And kind of work on that and work on how to make those improvements. Because people aren't always real good at understanding how they come across to others and what people are seeing and picking up on. Did I answer your question, Matt?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And would be curious then, Anna, you talked about both just the ability of like how working was different than school in terms of receiving feedback, but then would you also say like your self-awareness of critiquing yourself and just improving, like how did that change?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm definitely a lot more self-aware now than I was in college. Yeah, I mean, I know, like in college, I was able to get away with procrastinating hardcore, like really bad. But now, like Shauna said, like people expect you to get things done at a certain time. Like you work on a team, and like if you say you're gonna do something and then like you don't, like you're gonna get in trouble for that. Like people are gonna be upset. So like I'm a lot more aware that like I need to schedule things on my calendar for me to do it. Otherwise, I'm just gonna forget. Just like little things like that, I've really learned more about myself. So yeah, it's a good thing.
I think that's some all of us, yeah, benefit of just building routines and successful habits. Shout out to all our Wallin advisors that help us with that. How about yourself, Shauna?
I think getting feedback and like getting the critiques, I keep all of mine and just like make notes to it so that I can like refer back to it. And if I ever feel like I'm slipping back into old ways or something, I can go back to see like this is how my team prefers I do stuff, whether it's like over communicate or communicate less or what they prefer. Because there's some people who like want daily updates, but other people who just want to check in like once a month and they don't really care about what you're doing really. But yeah, just I feel like I've learned a lot about myself too of like how I can sort through and not take things personally. They're not attacking me as a person, they're just trying to help me become a better employee and a better coworker. It's nothing personal, it's just trying to make things better for everyone. Easier for everyone too.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. We'll plan on opening this up to students. If you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat bar. And it looks like, Bailey, you beat me to it before I even finished. but a question just came in saying, how much academic knowledge from what you learned in college really felt like relevant or applied to your job? And do you get the most out of training when you're at your job?
So for me, and for the, so I've hired a lot of people. I don't tend to hire people directly out of college. They tend to hire into the plants. And then we tend to hire them from the plants into my role. But for the people in our manufacturing plants, a teeny bit of information was relevant. You know, we work on adhesive coatings, and there's maybe some bits of the fluids that were important. But really when we hire people, what we're looking for is you have the ability to learn, because most of your training is going to be on the job. So we're looking for, what did you get out of your classes? Did you have an interest in learning? Did you have, honestly, I was president of my sorority and president of the student body of mechanical engineers. I think that helped me get my job as much as any of my classes, because they were looking for somebody who's willing to step up and take ownership of something and run with it. And that's as important as the technical knowledge, as I stated previously. So the things that I learned, the equations, not that important. I had to learn a whole new set of equations when I started at 3M. And, you know, they sent me to those classes and gave me those books that I would need to do the job. But I just had to prove that I had the ability to learn them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, I feel like I'm barely using anything in college, really, other than like I use CAD a lot, but even that, like, it wasn't even like a class that I had to take. Like, you know, I feel like a lot of the clubs or like extracurriculars that I was in really helped me more, like being hands-on in the wood shop or metal shop. Like, I was able to understand, like, you know, common manufacturing terms and stuff like that. That was a lot more important than anything that I would have learned in an actual class. And yeah, like being president of like a group or something, like that showed that you had like the ability to be a leader. So I think that's a lot more important.
Just to add to what they said, my first 3 months or so with Boston Scientific, I took so many classes and I had all of those learning materials. I took a stats class. I took 2 semesters, so like a whole year worth of stats in college. They basically went through that entire year of stats in 3 days at this class. And like, they just took out all the stuff I don't need and just gave me the stuff that I do use in my role. And so it wasn't really all that important, but now I handle a bunch of spreadsheets. And like they've said too, I was a community involvement officer for the Society of Women Engineers. And so I had to handle a lot of spreadsheets to see like what schools wanted to do what and like what volunteers were needed. And so I had lots of spreadsheets and lots of Excel files that I would go through and use all of that. And just knowing all the shorthand for Excel has come in extreme. It's been so helpful. So it's not necessarily the coursework that I stressed about for hours on end, but it's my clubs that I actually had fun at that have helped me the most in my college. Not saying you shouldn't stress about your classes. You should still go to them and still do well.
Grades are important.
Yeah, they're important. But just being able to have some sort of escape in a club was really helpful.
Well, I think all of you, have spoke to just your engagement of it going beyond just school, and sounds like where you each kind of found your interests, and then the network that you built and those social interactions really helped with opportunities. So one of the questions we just got in was, how do you navigate disagreements or those difficult feelings, discussions when there's like disputes on a team?
So I can start. When I started in a plant actually in Freehold, New Jersey, and 3 years after I started, we were shutting down the plant and moving it to a site in Indiana. And so I was picked to lead this huge team. And you're gonna laugh, this was back before we had email attachments. So, you know, every weekend we had to go in and produce 26-page faxes, and we faxed the information to every site. And so it was a huge team, and we had these big phone meetings. And the quality guy on the team was we probably shouldn't swear, he was a jerk. But he held my team hostage. He just was kind of a jerk about everything. So I'd even gone to a supervisor, and unfortunately his supervisor was weak and wasn't, didn't know how to handle it, kind of just hands off. So I felt like I was kind of on my own. And again, I was 24 now. This guy was 58. So I scheduled a one-on-one meeting with him one day, just sat in his office, and I said, okay, Ken, what will it take to get, this has to happen. What will it take to get you on board? And the things he wanted really kind of irked me. They didn't seem in my mind important, but I had to work with him to get that data put together to get him on board. And in the end, it worked beautifully, and he was a huge proponent. So that was the right steps to take, but it was annoying. So that was probably the most disagreeable person I've ever had to work with, and the most out of my way I've had to go. But I would say on smaller levels, I take that tactic with people in general. When they're starting to be disagreeable, okay, take a moment, step back. I don't agree with you, but what's your side of it? What will it take? Is there data you need to see, or is there concern you have that we can mitigate? What can we do to address your viewpoint? And when people feel like they're being heard, they'll get on board, for the most part.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. One of the other questions that was asked earlier was, do you recommend applying for jobs right now with the pandemic going on? How many companies at each of your companies, does it feel like there's still hiring going on? What is the general environment?
I know 3M has an external hiring freeze right now, so that's hard. I'd still absolutely be applying.
Yeah, I would say, I know Boston Scientific also has an external hiring freeze, but one thing that I got asked a lot when I did job interviews was I had a break, it was just like a short little break in between school sessions. And I always got asked, what did you do with that break? Mm-hmm. So even if you can't get a job this summer, there's a bunch of coding classes and free classes online these days. Try to take some of those classes, try to learn a new skill. So instead of saying I just sat at home and did nothing, you can at least still say I used this break to learn this skill. And hopefully I would still recommend applying for jobs, because you never know, there might be something somewhere. But definitely try to find some sort of class where you can learn something that's relevant to your major.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
And coding or CAD, you can get CAD on your computer.
Yeah. As far as Target goes, I know we're still hiring because we're doing really well. A lot of people are shopping at Target. So if anyone's interested in that kind of work.
I'm seeing several head nods. So you shared a little bit about, I really like the advice of take advantage of the time that we have, even as you're continuing to apply for roles, learning new skills. What are the things that feel most relevant both in school and now over the summer that students could be doing to continuing to develop skills, build relationships, anything that helps for a future career opportunity?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
I think something that I did in college that I still reflect on a lot is reaching out to people in the role that I want in the future. The first time I did it, it was a friend's dad, and that was when I was still doing just mechanical engineering, and he was in a design role, and I was like, oh, that just seems cool. I honestly just wanted to see what he did every day. So went and did a tour, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. I might take some more classes. And then once I started taking classes, I had, a network where I could reach out to someone at Target and be like, can I come just see what a day in the life of someone who works at Target is like? Obviously you can't really do that right now with the pandemic, but I think it'd still be helpful to be reaching out to people maybe doing a Zoom call with someone, just talking to them about what their job is like, because then when you're applying, you can be like, hey, I spoke to so-and-so in this department, and that really helps. And I think that was a big factor of how I got my current job.
I assume if your seniors are all working with your college's career resource, but they're the first place I would hit up and see. They might have ideas on other ways to be connecting with people. You know, my first thought went to internships, but companies aren't even really doing those anymore because starting a virtual internship is really difficult. But hitting up your career resource office, I don't know what they call it nowadays, seeing if they have advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Career services at all the schools are open. Advisors, happy to help. Another thing we'd encourage is the Wallin Wisdom Project. I'll send a follow-up link to each of you. But just as Anna shared, really starting that conversation and continuing to build the network with professionals that are in roles that you're interested in. Any other questions from students? So I'd be curious. Go
I
ahead.
just want to comment on Liz's question because I think she knows the story. So yeah, speaking of networking, when I first became a Wallin Scholar, they did the whole Wallin Scholar like introduction event where you got to like meet your sponsors, and there's a little like happy hour beforehand. My family just started talking to one of the sponsors randomly, and he asked what I wanted to do in the future, and I said, I don't know, I think it'd be pretty cool to work at Boston Scientific. I'm a mechanical engineering major. And then he handed me his card, and he ended up being the vice president of research and development at Boston Scientific. So it was really random, but it was really great. But so then I ended up working with I did a tour of Boston Scientific with one of his managers, and I just kind of fell in love with it. And I interned with her after my freshman year, and then she got me a co-op in Indiana. So I went to Indiana first semester. Then she brought me back to Minnesota, and then yeah, I stayed with Minnesota the next 2 summers. And then through my connections that I made with it as an intern, I was able to get my current full-time position. So networking in any possible way. It might seem really random to like talk to someone. I was really uncomfortable because I'm really introverted, but it was very important because I made a great connection that got me to where I am today.
I once heard the quote that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I always think of those moments of serendipity that you certainly took advantage and kept navigating through that. That's great. One of the other questions came in was about, do you feel that it's important to be switching companies throughout your professional career?
I guess that depends on your goal. I know it's more common nowadays to change companies. I think at a company like 3M, you're going to probably do better if you start and stay there and advance that's changing a little bit. It used to be very much that people who started there stayed there, and if you came in late, it weren't as easy to maybe advance. That is definitely shifting, but it's by no means the people who join late have an advantage. I've been with 3M my whole career. My husband has probably done a different job every 2 years. I think he's been in his last one now 10, but before that he was every 2 years. And the only negative to that really was starting over on vacation down at 2-3 weeks every time. So that's a negative that you may not be thinking of, but other than that, I don't know that it's a positive. It broadens your horizons. I think the benefit of a company like 3M is you can change jobs within the company every 2 years, experience lots of different roles, and feel like you have something new and exciting and different to work on, and that does make you more valuable as an employee if you want to move up the ranks. But I guess I'm not experienced at switching companies to speak to the other side of it.
But I think between the speakers of Target, Boston Scientific, and 3M, you can each speak to the different opportunities that exist within your organizations and how varied and new those experiences are. I'd be curious about that.
Sure. And at 3M, and actually, what I love about my job right now, we do manufacturing technology work. So the people that work for me, we're very project based. So their jobs change completely every 6 months to 2 years. They might be working on installing giant pieces of equipment in China for a year, and then they might be doing a cost down project in South Dakota, and then they might be commercializing a new product that they're scaling up in Texas. So even in my one job, without changing your job title, it can be completely different. On top of that, you can move between, healthcare and industrial and automotive and aerospace and personal safety and house cleaning, construction markets, air filters. We have lots of different markets and a lot of different technologies, and you can move back and forth between those. It used to be more common today to move back and forth between engineering and marketing. Now I'd say you'd have to probably go and get an MBA in marketing if you wanted to make that type of a shift. But anybody can move on to the business side. We have a lot of our best directors and VPs were previous manufacturing and engineers. I think they make the best directors and VPs.
Yeah, I'd say the same happens at Target. Like it's such a big company. There's so many different products that people can work on. And like without leaving your role, you can work on really anything. So something that I just started taking classes for is textile engineering, which is something I never did in college. But, it was something that I was interested in. I reached out to my leader. I was like, hey, like, it'd be cool for me to do like this side project. And she's like, okay, like take a class and you can start doing it. So without even changing my title, like I can work on other products other than just furniture. So I think that's really cool.
And I know with like Boston Scientific, we work with medical devices for the entire body. And so right now I work in peripheral interventions, which is like the venous stuff, and the product I work on specifically is for your legs. And so if at some point I decided I wanted to go work on more like heart stuff, I could go work in the heart stuff. We have like neuromodulation. So like Anna said, I could keep the same job title and work with a different body part, which I think is really cool. But I also know it's not uncommon for people to do rotations. Boston Scientific has like an edge rotation where you start off in like your home department. So I'm in quality, and then you move into like research and development and then manufacturing. So there's different programs like that. And you get to see like the whole product life cycle, which is pretty neat. And yeah.
I love it. One of the questions came in asking, did you look into income when you were choosing your jobs?
Not really. I knew engineers made a lot of money, so it worked out well that I liked math and science, which sent me to a career that was higher paying. I certainly didn't complain about that. It's not the reason I went into engineering. And then I graduated back in 1991, and we were in nowhere near the recession we're in today. It was a mini recession, but even in the middle of that, I had 8 job offers. So it was an in-demand career field, and they were all comparable on the pay. So all of the engineering roles were pretty well paying for the time. It's funny, I look back at back in 1991, $35,000 was an amazing starting salary.
I definitely utilized Glassdoor. So if no one knows what Glassdoor is, I highly recommend looking that up. I used Glassdoor in my like initial negotiations because it shows you the whole range of what engineers make. And so I was looking at that plus my like internship experience, and that's what I was using to negotiate. I didn't really choose it. Like Jennifer said, I didn't really choose my job because of the income. I wanted to do something that I knew 50 years from now I would still be passionate about, because otherwise you're just going to not enjoy going to work, and then you're not going to enjoy your life as much. So definitely choose something that you're passionate about. and worry about the income later, in my opinion.
For me, being in kind of like a engineering and like a design role, income was like a really broad range. Right when I graduated, I got an offer and I was shocked at how low the pay was going to be. And I tried to negotiate it, but it just didn't go very well. So I feel like in that instance, I mean, I obviously didn't accept that position because of income. But yeah, it was definitely something that I looked at, knowing that like, you know, there was a huge range depending on what kind of job I was looking for, whether it was like a designer or an engineer.
That's great. And I really would emphasize that glass door comment as well. And it's great that it sounds like each of you, as you've pursued your career, it's not just for the financial compensation, but that you've each ended up in opportunities where the money comes with your engagement in that role. It's great to see. I would be curious, what would you have to say for students that if they're struggling in a math or a science or a technical course, what should they you be doing, or what advice would you give?
I'd say it depends why you're struggling. If you don't like the subject matter, that's probably different than you enjoy it. And maybe this a couple, so I have twin daughters in college, and one is acing all of her STEM classes and the other one is struggling. They both are equally passionate about STEM and engineering, and they both should go into STEM fields. The fact that one is struggling has nothing to do with her affinity for that type of job. It's that that she's not really connecting with some of her teachers. So if that's what's going on, still go into a tech field. If you find you just hate math and you hate all your sciences, maybe engineering is not a good field for you. So, because even though you're not going to use what you're learning, you're still going to have an analytical mindset. And any job that you're going to as an engineer, you have to be able to collect and analyze data and to make a useful decision. So if that process doesn't excite you, you're not going to enjoy your job.
Yeah, I would agree that it's important to look at why you're struggling. I know for me, like I definitely struggled in college. And like looking back, I was definitely like involved in like way too many extracurriculars and like taking more credits than I should have, and also working some semesters. And so that's why I felt like I was struggling. It was never like an issue with like being passionate about the subject. But if that's why you feel like you're struggling because you don't like math, then maybe it is time to look into like a different major, different field.
My first, like, I had my first semester I had 3 midterms in like the same week, and I got all the grades back at the same time, and I failed 2 of the 3 of them. And it wasn't just like I was a straight A student in high school.
Send me additional ideas.
And it wasn't like I just go from I'm used to getting A's and now I'm getting B's. It was like I got a straight up 50% on these tests. And it was a matter of sitting down with my professors and just kind of seeing like, where did I go wrong? How can I do better? In both of the classes that I failed, I ended up getting A's in those classes. And my professors were like my best friend because I would go to their office hours, which is like free tutoring, by the way. And everyone says it, but not a lot of people take it to heart, but go to the office hours. And all my professors knew who I was because they would see me in their office hours. And when it comes down, if you have a nice professor that will round up grades, if they go through a list of the 400 students in their class, and if they recognize yours, there's a small chance they'll like round it up if they're feeling nice. You never know. But it definitely had to like buckle down and really get with my professors. I had tutoring in all of my STEM classes, And even classes that I didn't really need the tutoring, it was still nice to just have that dedicated hour each week to that class. So even if you're struggling in certain things, look at why you're struggling, like they said, but don't just give up because you think it's hard.
Love that advice to go to your teachers. They're there because they like teaching students.
Yeah.
And they want to know that you care about the subject matter enough to take action if you're failing. I also don't want to scare people off. If you're failing differential equations, but you like your other classes, you know, it's more if you hate all of your classes and then engineering mindset, you're in the wrong major. I hated feedback control loops. I got a D in feedback control loops. So if I had gone for a division engineering role where that was important, they wouldn't have hired me. To some extent, this problem will take care of itself. You know, if somebody looking for programming is not going to hire somebody who got a D in feedback control loops. Problem solved. I'm not going to go into an area that needs that job. So they know, the companies know what skill sets and what technical their skill sets they're looking for. So just be honest about your grades too. And you know, they think they usually look for your transcripts, but if I had been only applying to jobs that needed that class and I got a D in it and didn't like it and didn't understand it, that would have been a problem. So go to your strengths, the types of classes that you like, and see, this is where you can talk to people in the field. If I like these classes and don't like these classes, what kind of a job uses that skill set? And your career office should be able to help you with that too.
I love the leaning on our strengths. So we've talked a little bit about technical skills and what's needed. What about how important are good writing skills?
I hate writing. So I became an engineer. You know, I think they used to be more important when we did a lot of technical reports. I know at 3M at least. Writing has become more of email writing skills, not technical writing skills. We do far less of those reports than we used to, and far less than we should, frankly. But there is so many more emails, but it's a different skill set now. And I think how you have to be persuasive in your writing. Can you get to the point? You know, an executive summary and then the details. And then the people that are high up only ever read the executive summary, and the people on your team do the details. So that type of writing and the ability to convey your point is important. But your, you know, English class persuasive essay writing.
Yeah, I would agree that it's like just email writing, and there's definitely a huge range of writing skills within the engineers that I work with. There's people who spell everything wrong, don't use any punctuation, but you know, you still understand them, so it works out in that aspect. But I think more importantly than writing skills is like presentation skills. That's something that I was kind of thrown into, and I wasn't super comfortable presenting in front of like 100 people or anything, but you know, it's something that you got to do. So I think, you know, in that aspect, maybe like writing notes for yourself and like getting that down is more important than actual writing that you'd be used to in an English class.
Excellent. We just got a great question, and it's one I've always been curious about as well. One of the questions earlier is we talked about passion for your job. How do you know if you're just burnt out or that you don't have the passion?
One thing, if you ever have the opportunity to do a co-op, I highly recommend doing a co-op. I did a co-op my sophomore year and my spring semester of my sophomore year. And prior to that, I had 6 classes that were all within my engineering major. There was no like fun electives or anything. And so I thought I was burnt out. I just kind of wanted to quit, but then I was able to do this co-op, and it was planned literally during my finals week. So I had like 1 week of finals, and then the next week I moved to Indiana to do this co-op. But in those 20 weeks that I was in Indiana, I found out that I just needed a little break, and that I was still passionate about it, and like this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to do my engineering. It wasn't necessarily fun in school, but I knew that the end game would be fun and interesting. And so you can get burnt out, and you can and still have a passion for it. But if you can't keep your eye on like the end game, if you don't see the end anymore, then you might just not have that passion for it, if that makes sense.
I like the co-op recommendation. My only maybe note of caution, I had 3 internships, 2 at digital equipment and 1 at Harvard School of Public Health. And now as somebody who kind of helps put together programs for maybe interns and co-ops, it's really hard to take somebody, usually it takes 6 months just to get a new hire kind of up to speed on what's going on. To expect somebody to come in and learn a lot in that 6 months, and we give our people maybe roles that aren't that terribly exciting, because you want to have a piece of something they can own and complete while they're there. So if you do those internships, take the time to talk to everybody around you and look at what they're doing. And do you think, not maybe what do you think what you're doing that interesting, but all the people around you, the projects that they have, does that look interesting? Do you want to do those kinds of things? And just talk to as many people as you can and get from their experience, because you won't be doing what you're doing on a 3 or 6 month internship when you're hired.
Yeah, my first project in Indiana, I had over 300 parts that I had to use a ruler to measure all of the parts. And then I had to use the calipers to measure all the parts. And then I had to use a machine to measure all the parts. So in my first like 2 months of my 4-month program, I was literally just like playing with machines, which might not sound very fun, but the people I would meet in the labs with those machines, I would like shadow them for a day. And so I was out of my comfort zone because I had to like talk to people, but it helped me see more of the plant that I was working in and more of the facility, which showed me that this is what I wanted to do.
I love all the advice. I am conscientious of time. Would love if there's any final words, as many of our students, we're still figuring out what we want to be doing, navigating what different careers look like in school. Any final words?
I think engineering is where it's at. I think it's super exciting field. There are so many diverse options. I have a ton of friends from high school, college, and my sisters who are engineers. Everybody has such different jobs. Stay with it, start with a job. If it's not what you want, look for something else. There are so many people that need your skill sets and your brains and your experience, that it's a great field to be in.
Yeah, going off of that, I totally agree. There's like so many different opportunities. And I think in college, I really dwelled on like what my major was going to be and how that was going to affect the job I got. But like once you're like working, like you realize that everyone just majored in really random things, honestly. And, it doesn't really matter, honestly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I work with a bunch of people who were like biology majors or math majors. I'm the only trained engineer on my team. Everyone else was some other STEM major. But I would say just have fun with college, like get your work done. Don't take things seriously. But once you graduate college, you're going to be in the workforce for 60 years. Well, not 60, but like you're going to be in the workforce for a few years. But so just make sure you take the time to check in with yourself and make sure that this is what you want to do, because you're going to be doing it for a few years. You're not just done with it after college.
I love all the advice. Thank you so much for each of our speakers for the time today. Really appreciative. And for all the student questions, that always makes it the most beneficial. You each are clearly problem solvers, individuals that have taken initiative for your roles in and outside of school. If students want to stay in contact, how can they reach you? LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yep,
LinkedIn.
I'm on LinkedIn.
We'll be sure to send out that contact information on LinkedIn. For students that like this today and are still looking to other majors, we'll plan on May 22nd having a conversation around the more numbers-oriented business roles, whether it's finance, accounting, logistics, supply chain, all that fun stuff. And if students are looking to meet professionals, we have the Wallin Wisdom Project. We'll send that link out as well. It's a great way to meet professionals like we had on the call today. With if there's no other questions, we'll say that's all for today. Enjoy the weekend, everyone. And thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Have fun.
Thank you.